What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be going over some of the highlights from the previous developer live stream on May the 2nd, and then we're also going to be going over some of the newer changes made in the official patch notes that were released right after the developer chat. As you guys can see here, we are over on the PureDiablo website, and they have a phenomenal breakdown of the developer live stream, and they also have a copy of the patch notes that we'll be using as well. Now, these guys also have a really cool YouTube channel called Pure Damage, where they go over everything Diablo related, and they also reached a really cool accomplishment recently. They just got over 2K subscribers on YouTube. So I will be leaving a link to these articles down in the description of the video, as well as a link to their YouTube channel. So go on over and check those guys out and see if it's something that you might be interested in. So the very first thing I want to go over is a pretty significant change that they made to the itemization, specifically with regards to the in-game. So it was stated in the developer chat that all gambling done at the Diablo vendor with a character level 100 will now receive item power level 925 gear pieces, and these gear pieces will also have the opportunity to roll greater affixes on them. And if you know anything about Season 4, you're going to be looking for legendary gear pieces, and on those legendary gear pieces, you're going to be looking for greater affix rolls. And what this is going to allow the average player to do is to be able to target farm specific gear pieces that you may be missing for any given build you try in Season 4, and it's going to smooth out that overall gearing process going into the end game and actually make things a lot faster in terms of completing your characters. On top of this, they're adding several things that are making this a pretty key feature going into Season 4. So they're adding obble drops at the end of nightmare dungeons as well as pit runs, and they're also going to be increasing your obble cap from 1,000 to 2,500. Now, another thing to take notice is that they're going to be adding obble drops in the Helltide chest drops for this season, and there is also a seasonal journey attached to that that is then going to increase the amount of obbles you get from any given Helltide chest that you open. So you can imagine you're going to be using the vendor quite often, and you're going to be getting a lot of the better gear pieces, most likely from gambling at the vendor. Now, this does sound like a really good thing for casual players because it is going to dramatically decrease the amount of time required for you to create any given in-game build you'd like to try. However, for those hardcore blaster players, if you're not interested in playing a ton of characters this season, this may in fact cut your season dramatically short because you'll have completed probably pretty much all of the content and min-maxed your characters that you would like to try during the season relatively quick. So I do expect that there will be some players who are not too happy with this change, but overall, I think this will be a positive impact going forward and something that they may be able to tune up or down going into future seasons. The second thing I want to touch base on was the Veiled Crystal issue during the PTR. So if you hadn't played the PTR or you haven't watched any content covering the PTR, there were quite a few things that cost Veiled Crystals during the PTR, and it was incredibly hard to save up enough crystals to engage with a lot of the systems that they implemented in the game. So a lot of players, including myself, were asking them to please give us more Veiled Crystal drops into Season 4. And that is something that they definitely listened to and that they definitely did. So as you guys can see here, the salvage output has been increased to double for your sacred items and to triple for your ancestral items, and you'll now also receive Veiled Crystals from salvaging legendary gear pieces. They've also dramatically brought down the Veiled Crystal cost for changing out aspects on your gear pieces. So it previously was 75. They brought it all the way down to 16 Veiled Crystals. So you really should not have an issue anymore getting enough Veiled Crystals to engage with any system that is going to be incorporated into the game. Now, something else that I thought was very interesting is that the devs realized that players do want magic and rare items to still have a place in Diablo 4, so they did state that they are exploring ideas in ways that they can make magic and rare items more valuable for the average player going into future seasons. And lastly, they've made it much easier to actually see when you get a greater affix to drop on a specific gear piece. And something that I'm actually incredibly surprised by, because it was in my forum post, is that they actually added that same symbol to your greater affix roll gear pieces when they're in your inventory, so it's going to make it a lot easier to sort through your gears so you're not spending too much time actually going through your inventory. Now on to crafting, and one of the first things players were asking for when it came to masterworking as well as tempering is to add a skip button so players did not have to go through that lengthy animation process, and you better believe they did that here. On top of that, masterworking tiers 1 to 3 no longer have an animation whatsoever, so you can just click right on through and continue on with your masterworking at a much easier pace. Now, something everyone noticed when they went to exchange their masterworking materials after farming the pit is that when you exchange these items at the vendor, you would then have to repeatedly tap a key or a button on your controller to use all of these caches to get the items that you needed to masterwork lower tiers. Well, they've now actually fixed that, and it is not going to be a permanent fix. They plan on incorporating something much better later on, but they have made that process a lot smoother for players, so that way you're not wearing yourself out rapidly tapping a key or a controller button and possibly damaging your keyboard or controller just out of pure frustration. Now, something that they did change here that I think a lot of hardcore players are probably not too happy with is that they actually remove the fail chance for your masterworking. So now you'll just be able to masterwork a gear piece all the way up to level 12 and you'll never fail at any of those chances. And you'll also receive your masterworking on a specific affix at levels 4, 8, and 12. Now, even though they have smoothed out this process, do remember that you are not guaranteed to get the masterworking on the exact affix you prefer, so you may still in fact have to reset that item and constantly masterwork it until you get the very best item that you want for your build. And then here it just restates what I've already mentioned previously, that they dramatically decrease the cost of imprinting your legendary aspects onto your gear pieces. And then also it says here that the tempering system, which is something I've already stated previously, is a system that they will definitely be expanding upon in the future. I know for me, I love to play the Druid, and I think one of the coolest affixes they could add to the game would be something that would increase the size of your boulders you cast as a Druid, so you could possibly have a ton of really large boulders flying around your Druid using boulder cane builds. Now on to one of the largest changes that they made to the actual gameplay and how you are going to gear out your character for survivability going into Season 4, and that is they've actually made a static armor cap for your characters to achieve on your gear pieces. Now, what does that mean? So in previous seasons, your armor caps were determined by the level of monster you were actually killing. So as you can see here on this slide that was available in the developer chat, when you were killing monsters at level 50, you would need about 5.3k armor. Monsters at level 100, you would need about 9.3k, and then monsters at level 150, you would need about 13k armor. And this would continue to scale as you continue to do higher level content when you were killing monsters that may be level 199, for instance, at the higher tiers of the pit. Now, the developers saw that this was actually a little bit confusing for most players, so what they have decided to do is that they have decided to cap out the amount of armor you need at monster level 100. So now, no matter how high the level is of a monster that you are fighting, you will only need to get 9,230 armor, or I would say just 9.3k armor, to reach the physical resistance cap of 85% damage mitigation. And they've also made this a lot clearer for you to understand when you inspect the tooltip for your armor stat and your player stats category. Now, the reason why this is such a massive change is because you are now going to be able to reach this armor cap incredibly easy. It was already pretty easy to reach armor caps for higher tier content because you had the Juggernaut aspect, which gave you a ton of base armor, or you even had aspects like Disobedience, which they actually buffed up, which gave you a certain percentage increase to your armor. And honestly, there were quite a few gear pieces that would allow you to gain armor percent. Now, what this actually does is pretty much render all of that stuff pretty useless going into Season 4, and it's definitely something that they're going to have to address later on. But what this means for the average player is that you're probably going to be able to obtain this armor cap with maybe one static armor roll, and the rest of the armor that you get in the game from your gear pieces should pretty much carry you through into reaching that 9.3k armor cap. And in my opinion, this is going to make getting HP as well as dodge chance the king for survivability going into Season 4. So this is actually something I'm pretty interested to know about what you guys think. Do you guys like this change to the armor caps? Do you not like it? Do you think it's too easy to reach the armor cap? And what are your opinions as to how you plan on building out survivability for your characters going into Season 4? Something else they added in were some stat caps to some specific affixes changes on your gear pieces, so you can no longer get above 75% cooldown reduction on your gear pieces, and you can also no longer increase the area effect size of your abilities through your gear pieces over 100%. Now, this is only through your gear pieces, so you will still be able to get more cooldown off of other aspects of your builds. So through skills or your Paragon board, you will still be able to get cooldown there. But just know that these are the new caps, and they are also adding this onto the tooltip in your stats page for your character. Now, just something I did want to mention about balance changes. They did go ahead and increase the amount of damage reduction you got from Fortify, so that's going to be more valuable for players going into Season 4, especially because of the lack of damage reduction rolls you can get on your gear pieces. But I'm not going to be going over specific balance changes to the classes because I play the Druid, and I will be making a separate video for the Druid, so just go ahead and go on over and check those out for yourself. There really wasn't too many that they changed from my previous videos covering the PTR changes, so if you are interested in that stuff, I do have a video going over all of the PTR patch notes in depth on my channel. Now onto some changes that they made to the in-game content. So it was stated that they did go ahead and buff enemy health for enemies above level 100 for both the pit and the nightmare dungeon. And they also brought down some of the enemy damage you'll be receiving because of the amount of one-shots people were experiencing in the PTR. They also modified the master working material drops that you'll be receiving from the different pit levels. So you'll get tier 1 master working materials from pit level 1 to 29, tier 2 from pit level 30 to 59, and then tier 3 from pit level 60 plus. And honestly, I don't think this is going to be an issue for any of the players playing Season 4. And I do believe the majority of players in the end game will be farming pit tiers over level 100, and you'll be getting tons of masterwork materials when you do so, and I don't really think this makes much of a difference. Also, because of the health increase, they did go ahead and increase the amount of time you have to complete your pit runs from 10 minutes to 15 minutes. However, guys, do remember that there is a pretty hefty penalty for multiple deaths in the pit, so you'll still have to be very careful and manage your time, especially going into those higher tier pit runs. As I stated previously, right here it just tells you that you're not going to get obble drops from doing nightmare dungeons as well as pit runs, and that they did go ahead and increase the obble cap to 2,500. Also, something to note is they're also increasing the glyph XP you're going to be earning from nightmare dungeons across the board, and there's also a new seasonal journey that's going to be added in Season 4 that's going to further increase the amount of glyph XP you get from completing your nightmare dungeons. So a lot of that glyph grind is going to be much smoother in Season 4. Also, something I know a lot of hardcore players were kind of annoyed by in the pit is that after you kill the boss at the end of the pit, a lot of times some of their combat mechanics would continue to go off, and this would cause the untimely death of your character. So they thankfully decided that once you kill the boss, all of the boss's attacks stop immediately. So that is definitely a welcome change, especially because I love to play hardcore and I plan on rolling a hardcore character at the beginning of the season. They also decreased the amount of summoning materials required to summon tormented bosses from 5 times the standard amount to now 3 times the standard amount, and this will actually improve efficiency when you're farming your uniques and your uber unique items from these tormented bosses. So if you're really good at killing tormented bosses, you're actually going to be receiving a pretty sizable reward for doing so. They also added a Resplendent Spark as a reward for your first Echo of Lilith kill for the season, and they also added an uber drop rate to all of the ladder bosses involved, so you'll be receiving a lot more ubers this season, whether you play casually or you're a hardcore blaster. And then something for the world bosses, the devs felt it was finally time to increase the health of these world bosses, and I hope this is something they continue to do in the future. I really enjoy the world bosses, so I would definitely like to see some stronger versions of these world bosses, so that way players can really engage with these mechanics and possibly receive some much better loot for doing so. Now onto Helltides, and Helltides are a massive part of Season 4, and they're getting a massive rework and having quite a bit of stuff added to them. So just to highlight a few things, if you did not already know, Helltides are now going to be able to be done in World Tiers 1 and 2, and in fact, this is probably going to be the most efficient way to level your characters going into Season 4. However, the Helltides in level 1 and 2 will be tailored for brand new characters, so you won't have to worry about a lot of the stronger mechanics that appear appear in Helltides in tier 3 and 4. Then there is a small section here about the Helltide threat mechanic. So basically all it is you kill enemies, you build threat. Once you reach the threat threshold, you then get ambushed by a bunch of enemies, which will culminate in the spawning of a Hellborn enemy. And do be aware, guys, these guys can actually be pretty tough early on, so don't take them lightly. But once this enemy spawns, it will reset your threat meter, and if you kill this enemy, you'll get some nice rewards for doing so. Now on to the Accursed Ritual, which is the brand new global event they're adding to Helltides, and this one is a lot of fun. And what this basically is you'll get these things called Baneful Hearts, and once you have these hearts, you'll then put them on pedestals at a specific location on the map, and it takes 3 Baneful Hearts to actually activate this event. Once you do so, you will enter into a global event, which all players can participate in. And this event will summon a ton of monsters, but at the very end of the event, you will summon the Blood Maiden. And she's also actually pretty tough as well, so do be aware of that when you start playing in Season 4. But once you complete this event, you'll get a pretty sizable reward, and they've also increased the amount of reward you get from this event. And something else that is worth mentioning, that if you contribute a Baneful Heart in the event activation process, you'll actually get a larger amount of loot than players who did not contribute anything. However, this loot bonus is not multiplied by the amount of hearts you add to the event, so all you have to do is add 1 Baneful Heart to get the maximum bonus from the event. Also, something they acknowledged on the PTR is that they nerfed the Cinder drop rate too much, so they did go ahead and increase the Cinder drop rate, so you should be receiving a lot more Cinders, which is obviously going to help you a lot in the leveling process going into Season 4. They also increased the amount of Baneful Heart drops you'll be getting, so you'll be able to engage with the Accursed Ritual event a lot more often. And like I said previously, they upped the amount of rewards you'll receive when you do kill the Blood Maiden. And then something small here, the brand new Chest of Doomsaying now will just open up immediately once it drops for you, instead of requiring you to use 50 Cinders to open it. And they also reduced the channeling time on opening Tormented Gifts from 3 seconds to 1.5 seconds, which is definitely a welcome change considering you're going to be able to open up a lot more chests and Helltides going into Season 4. Now let's talk about the Season 4 theme, and this one's not actually as transformative like in Season 3 with the Seneschal construct or in Season 2 with the vampiric powers. Because of all the massive changes they've made going into Season 4, this is a much more toned down seasonal theme. So this one has to do with the Iron Wolves, and what you're going to be doing is helping these Iron Wolves achieve certain goals, which is going to build your reputation with the Iron Wolves. And what this reputation is going to do is it is going to allow players to work through the Wolf's Honor reward system, and one of the rewards at the end of the system is a Resplendent Spark. So you're actually going to be able to get quite a few Resplendent Sparks this season. I believe the total now is 8 or 9 Resplendent Sparks you can obtain. It's 1 from each Tormented boss, 1 from the new Echo of Lilith bonus, and then now you're getting 1 from the Wolf's Honor reward system. So by the time you're done with all of that, every single player should be able to easily obtain 2 free Uber Uniques of your choosing from the Resplendent Spark system. Going down further, you'll also see there is a new consumable we will have in Season 4 for the seasonal theme, and that is a Profane Mind Cage. And what this Mind Cage does is once you consume it, you will increase the level of monsters in Helltides by 10 levels, and then you'll also increase the amount of Cinder drops you get during the Helltide, and this will last up to 1 hour. Now, you cannot stack this consumable. However, if you use this consumable before the time runs out, it will refresh the buff. Now, something that I thought was actually pretty interesting is that you'll also be able to use this consumable for World Tier 1 and World Tier 2 Helltides, which is going to make making multiple characters during a season a lot easier to do because you're going to be able to level from 1 to 100 incredibly fast, especially because they're also increasing the amount of XP you get from the higher world tiers. And with all of the Cinder drop rate increases, you're going to be able to open up a ton of chests and get a lot of XP this season. And then the last thing I want to talk about is the Season 4 reward caches you're going to be get for your specific classes as you play through the game. And these reward caches are actually going to drop you gear pieces for specific builds. Now, this is a very similar system from Diablo 3 where you would obtain an entire set from doing seasonal tasks. And this is something that the developers actually want to have some feedback on. So the very first thing I'm going to do is run a hardcore pulverized druid going into Season 4. So that way I can test the system out and actually be able to give them some feedback on it. I personally don't necessarily like systems like this. However, it's not something that I really find to be that big of a deal. So if it's something that they leave in the game for the future, I really have no problem with it. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. Are you excited for this system, or are you not a big fan of it? Now, something that's worth mentioning from the patch notes is the minimum level requirement for you to equip specific gear pieces is now changed. So for sacred gear pieces, it only requires you to be level 35. And the really big one here, for ancestral gear pieces, it only requires you to be level 55. And this is actually another massive change in terms of leveling multiple characters for a season. Previously, in order to equip farmed gear that you had acquired from another character, you had to be level 80. Or you had to find someone to carry you through higher tier content so you could farm up ancestral gear pieces and equip them at level 65. So if you can imagine, with all the XP changes and the amount of experience you're going to be receiving from doing Hell Tides, you're going to be able to get to level 55 incredibly fast, and then you're going to be able to use a full set of ancestral gear that you've probably pre-farmed on your first character and level that character from 55 to 100 insanely fast in Season 4. Now, again, in my opinion, I love a really fast leveling process. I don't believe getting to level 100 is that big of an achievement. However, I will also state that it is important to have a very robust in-game to keep players entertained after they've reached level cap. So one of the things that I am worried about is that there's not going to be enough in-game content to keep a lot of players around for a long time, because leveling is going to be incredibly easy and the gearing process is also going to be incredibly easy. So I will not be surprised if there are a lot of players who are actually quite disappointed with how fast they complete everything in Season 4, and I do think that they are going to have to expand on the in-game pretty rapidly if they plan on keeping a lot of this stuff intact. Now, like I said, I'm not going to be going over specific class changes in this video because I will be making a separate video for Druid players because I am a Druid player myself, but I do want to touch base on a few general things here, and this is a few of the things that they did not mention in the developer stream. So they did make a lot of changes with how boots function with their innate affix. So the maximum evade charges affix has now been increased from 2 to 3. The attacks reduce evades cooldown affix, which is my personal favorite set of boots, has now been increased, guys, from 0.8 seconds to 1.5 seconds. So if you're a metamorphosis lover like I am, you're going to be able to reset your metamorphosis incredibly fast in Season 4. And then the worst of the bunch, the evade grants movement speed affix has now been increased from 50% to 125%. However, I don't think this will make those boots any more valuable. And then on top of all the armor cap changes that they made, they are also increasing the amount of all resist we get from our amulets. So we are now going to receive a whopping 25% all resist from our amulet slot alone. And then they're also going to be increasing the single elemental resistances we get on our rings from 8% to 10%. I also want to remind players that there is a brand new robust elixir system they are bringing to the game. Elixirs are going to be a lot easier to farm up and use, so do be mindful of that going into Season 4. There are a lot of really strong elixirs you can craft, and they're going to be pretty easy to craft, and they're also going to continue to give you that nice little 5% experience bonus. Now onto the gauntlet, and I haven't actually seen a lot of people cover this, but this is actually a pretty significant change as to how you'll be approaching the gauntlet in Season 4. So what this says here is that boss monsters will no longer drop a shrine if they have been regenerated by the Pillar of Proving. Now, there is still a lot of stuff, in my opinion, that they have to do to the gauntlet to really make that leaderboard system a lot better for every player involved. However, like I said, this is a pretty big step in the right direction. I honestly think they should remove every single shrine out of the gauntlet itself, except for the pillars that regenerate monsters and the pillar that gives you bonus points for killing monsters. They probably also need to increase the overall difficulty of your gauntlet runs, given the fact that player power is going to see a significant jump going into Season 4, and there could also be larger rewards added for completing the gauntlet for all players involved. However, this is a pretty solid change, and I do hope they continue to refine the gauntlet, because I actually think there's the potential for this to be quite fun, and it's definitely nice to have more things to do for in-game content. Now something really cool for keyboard or mouse players here. So traversal skills such as leap and teleport can now easily travel the distance to go to the edge of your screen. However, this will not work with ultra wide monitors, and this is probably just to make sure that you can't teleport or leap into places that you're not supposed to. And last but certainly not least, your mounts can now be spurred in town, guys. So not only have they positioned vendors in a much more efficient way in towns, but now you're actually going to be able to sprint on your horse to get to those vendors faster and then get back out of town much quicker to get back into the action. But anyways, guys, that's all for the video. I'm incredibly excited for Season 4. Lots of great changes announced in the developer stream and a few really cool hidden gems in the patch notes. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. Are you as excited as I am for Season 4? And what are some of the changes that you wish they would have added going into Season 4? Also, like I said, a link to both of these PureDiablo website articles will be down in the description of the video, as well as a link to their YouTube channel. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and go on over and check them out. And I will also be uploading my thoughts on the Druid going into Season 4, as well as a tier list for you guys to check out. So be on the lookout for that tomorrow. But as always, guys, I hope you're having a great day or a great night, depending on wherever you're from. And peace out, guys. I will see you in the next one.